On this episode of DM Gives Inspiration, we're going to talk about training, schooling, as a downtime activity. And I mean here in-game downtime. Time not spent adventuring. Downtime is a phrase used in the core rulebooks as well as Xanathar's Guide to Everything. Basically a catch-all term for activities in towns and cities, working a job, crafting magic items. There are also details for things like partying, spreading rumors, bed rest, recuperating from poisons and diseases, researching, whether it's asking for rumors at a pub or perusing the books in a huge city's library. But I find the downtime activity that players get most excited about is training, improving their character, making themselves more unique, making themselves different from others of the same class, maybe even breaking the restrictions of their class in the rules as written way, becoming something more akin to their fantasy, their headcanon. For instance, most spells require a material component. You have to be holding the cricket's leg, a bat's wing. Most of these are covered by the spell component pouch. But visually, the player might not think of themselves as holding that cricket's leg aloft when they cast their cool spell. So they have to go with an arcane focus instead, a wand, an orb, a staff, that allows them to channel their abilities. That's not in their fantasy either. What if they just want to wave their hands? Well, in your downtime, you may be able to give them that ability. The downtime activity, training, rules as written, is extremely limited. Players can spend time between adventures learning a new language or training with a set of tools. First, you must find an instructor willing to teach you. The training lasts for 250 days and costs 1 gold per day. After you've spent the required amount of time and money, you learn the new language or gain proficiency with a new tool. The 250 days do not need to be consecutive. There is also no benefit or consequence if you train for more than 250 days. Languages are pretty self-explanatory. A player may want to be able to communicate or read another form of writing, and they may expand their horizons with the cost of days and gold. Training with tools, however, varies greatly in its usefulness. You could become trained in the artisan tool alchemist supplies, and now be able to craft potions for your party. You might take up leatherworking, smithing, tinkering, weaving, wood carving, and be able to make items with their own lengthy time and money requirements. You could also become proficient with thieves' tools, a disguise kit, a forgery kit, thereby gaining a new way to interact in the city. You might also learn how to operate a vehicle, be it land or water, or you might even learn how to play a musical instrument. But altogether, that's pretty limiting. It's a pretty hefty cost, 250 days of downtime, and you might learn to play the lute. Meanwhile, another player is investigating their father's murder, participating in the arena, becoming a gladiator of renown, joining in politics. Ultimately, this training doesn't have a lot to it. What if there could be more? What if there was a school, a university, that players could attend with their 250 days? For the right cost. Can we expand the pool of training options to include things like armor proficiencies, weapon proficiencies, skill proficiencies, trading out spells, learning new spells? Would you even allow stat increases, class changes, respecking paths? Would you allow a full level up? As DM, you can do whatever the heck you want, but let's break this down in terms of game mechanics. And let's start by putting some limitations on this idea. First and foremost, we cannot negate adventuring. The adventure, the campaign, the quest, is what brings all these players together. All the different classes, walks of life, are all gathered around this central thread. You do not want to create such a robust university system that those who choose to do other downtime activities feel left out, or even worse, feel underpowered, feel left behind. This is an active exchange with the adventure. In particular, an opportunity for you to take away their wealth, to get them to spend it. They gain the wealth to spend on this type of schooling by adventuring. It's also important to make sure this feels like downtime for your players. Out in the wilds, they are constantly hunted, attacked, and in mortal danger. During these downtime activities, for the most part, they should feel safe in terms of hit points. This doesn't mean there's not rumors and subterfuge, crime and theft, Their reputation and their bank account might be on the line. But for the most part, their lives should not. And this is where you might need to control yourself a little bit. Make sure things don't go full Harry Potter. There doesn't have to be a major villain in these 250 days. And most of all, you should avoid explosive outbursts. You might be drawn to, feel the need during these low points in action to suddenly have something exciting happen. You're nervous the players aren't having fun, so you whip up a bit of explosive combat in the classroom. Not necessary. Also very time intensive if only one of your players is taking part in the schooling. But that doesn't mean it's free of your greater story. You should absolutely work in teachers and students that can inform your world, add flavor and theming. They could even host conversations that are going to be important down the road. This is a great opportunity to hook up your player characters with NPCs they can make use of later on, experts they can visit at future points in the story. Fellow classmates could become rivals and competitors. I really enjoy the university setting as a gateway to the greater world early on in my campaign. This usually happens in conjunction with their arrival in the first big major city. At that point, I have several goals as DM I'm trying to accomplish. I want to show players the greater world to experience, give them a taste, have them start looking at maps and gaining information. I also want them to start spending their gold before it gets ridiculous. And at a certain point, gold doesn't matter anymore because the magic items being handed out through adventuring are just far outclassing anything they would possibly buy in town. I also want them to optimize and learn their characters before things get too dangerous. And by nature of a university, your NPCs can instruct your players, suggest playstyles or spells they might pick up. You could host a spellcasting class where you sit down with the players and actually go through and try out the various spells inside. Some players need more help than most understanding everything their class can do, but it's not always obvious what a spell is going to feel like, what the chance to hit is, looking at the spell on a piece of paper. Role-playing that out can give your struggling players a real chance to catch up. Classes can also make things like crafting a lot more interesting. Give them an NPC to talk to and something to do for all those days of downtime. Let's say your player wants to create a suit of plate armor for themselves, custom made by their own hands. Well, rules as written, you can go at a rate of 5 gold increments per day, working for 8 hours a day. And at market value, plate armor is 1,500 gold pieces. So it takes 300 days to craft that item. Can we theme up that downtime a little bit? Make it a suit of armor class, where they would spend their 250 days creating that piece. You could also have a make a magic item class, though they're built at a different rate and the prices don't exactly agree with each other. Magic items are created at 25 gold increments per day. However, the price of the magic items varies based on which rulebook you are using, whether it's the core rulebook or you're making use of Xanathar's Guide to Everything. Xanathar's Guide to Everything has decreased costs for making magic items, but it also assumes that you are going on various quests to gather up the essential elements and materials you need to finish the process. But now we're starting to get that training to be a lot more interesting. So you need to decide how your school system works. How is the curriculum laid out? What sort of classes are required? You have to take History of the Academy? History of the Nation? What sort of information could you hide in there? Make your lore a bit of a memory game for later down the road. Are they required to take a language class? Everybody gets a new language by participating in this academy? Can you hand them a list of classes? The pool they can choose from? What's available? These could vary wildly in power. From simple tool proficiencies to those level ups, to a full respec of your character if you wanted. If you're looking for ideas, look at the various class features. Things like Ranger's favorite enemy. After taking a class on giants, the player has advantage on wisdom survival checks to track that monster. Advantage on intelligence checks to recall information about them. That's a level 1 feature. That's not so insane. Plus, it's representing the information they would now hold in their heads that they learned during those classes. But something like Natural Explorer, or certainly Fighting Style, might be too much. We can go really crazy with these classes if every player becomes involved. What is the grading like? Do they roll a D4, A, B, C, and D, and add their intelligence modifier? Do only players with negative intelligence modifiers have a chance of an F? Would intelligence-based classes ace all their courses? Or should you bring it down to one dramatic roll, one arcane check, to know if they learn that new spell after 250 days? Maybe they attended study sessions. Maybe they got along with the teacher. If the players show their investment and their desire to pass the class and gain that new feat and feature, let's give them all the advantages we can there. Is there a final test, a practical exam, a dissertation they need to create? What sort of quests could you give your players that would be enjoyable? Side quests that don't really have a place in your overall campaign. You're doing a full-blown undead storyline? Maybe this is where they can go face a dragon. Maybe the dragon is actually an instructor. Maybe the instructor is a dragon in disguise and reveals himself to be the instructor at the end of the test. What if the final for a class about the Underdark is finding a cave that leads to the Underdark? They don't go in it. The school's not trying to kill anybody. But that location is now on their map for future adventures. Every single language class, lore class, Magic 101, crafting class could end with an enjoyable side quest. But the real question, just like in real life, is how much is this going to cost? Well, remember, one of our goals here is to take away our players' wealth, to make use of their money. Gold, after all, is in a weird space in Dungeons & Dragons. Earlier editions, like 3rd edition, also had tables that suggested the amount of gold players should have per level, and that doesn't exist anymore. So first and foremost, the amount of gold it's going to cost to go to university is going to be dependent on how much gold you've given them. If you've been dishing out the goods, it should be pretty expensive. If you've been stingy, well, it can be state-sponsored. Maybe even a hero academy of sorts. Done for the good of the nation. There are a couple of rules as written we can pull from, though. There is an optional rule for training whenever you level up. In this rule set, upon reaching enough XP or a milestone to level up, you do not gain the benefits until you return to your master, your trainer. There you spend a number of days based on the level, and a set amount of gold. For 3rd level, this would be 10 days with the trainer, and 20 gold pieces. So we could say our academy is based on the player's level. A 3rd level student pays 2 gold a day, or 500 gold, over the length of the school year. But do they live at the school? That would be an opportunity for more drama, more intrigue. In which case, going off the lifestyles table, 2 gold only means you have a comfortable style of living for each day you're in town. This means either the accommodations are great and the school's awful, or you're going to class paying the teachers, but living in squalid conditions. We could assume something like Hogwarts would be a wealthy school, costing at least 4 gold a day, maybe even going aristocratic, up to 10 gold a day. Now we're getting to about 2,500 gold, which is okay if you've really been dishing it out. But the average treasure hoard has about 70 gold pieces in it, plus objects worth about 250 gold pieces. So it might be best to ditch the boarding school element for your low-level players. But I find 2,000 gold to be the sweet spot for those level 4 players. Slightly out of reach, just enough to maybe spur them to take on some additional jobs, with spending that gold as the goal. After all, the city is full of money-making opportunities. What if we also charge premiums for certain classes we know they want, and really push their pocketbooks? You could also just give it as a reward. The city, after performing a great deed, covers the players to go to the local university. A great way to make use of the university system if you haven't been including currency in your current game. Overall, be generous, but cautious. Just because the players took a class in talking with dragons doesn't mean they earn a dragon egg at the end. If you have any questions about creating systems like this, anything in the rules, or anything Dungeons & Dragons related at all, next week is the first mailbag of Season 7. You can contact the show via the website at kylefergusson.com, 2 S's in Fergusson. Scroll to the bottom to find the contact link. On that website, you can also find a link to the Twitter, and you can message me there instead, should you choose. Music was by Brian Griffith, and I'll see you next week with that first mailbag of DM Gives Inspiration, Season 7.